You're listening to the Fezcast, the Saracens fans podcast, bringing you the independent and unhinged views of the voices in our heads, as well as those of our special guests. To get in touch with us, find the Fezcast on social media and listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube and more. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy this week's show.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode whatever it is of the Fezcast. We're still counting on two hands, but I've already lost count of it. Probably 7, I'm not really sure. But I'm back and we've got Sam who's with us, who's looking pretty chirpy, and Duncan as well, who's looking far less chirpy.
Yeah, I got waylaid at Waterloo Station on the back home from Quins last night and must have thought it was Saturday.
We'll say no more. But Sam, you're doing okay despite the weekend, yeah?
Oh yeah, happy as Larry. I didn't get drunk last night, which is strange for me because usually weekends, full of beer exploits. But no, all my misery was just compounded by Saracens losing. So yeah.
I mean, it was my wedding
men's team anyway
over the weekend, and we were at home by 9 o'clock. So Duncan's the party animal of all of us. But yeah, we've got plenty to talk about. There's some big talking points from this weekend. But first, we're going to cover. It's slightly chronological, I think. We're going to cover the women's rugby that happened at the weekend because there's plenty of positives from that. Probably best to start with the internationals as they were happening first. England winning the WXV1 tournament, which relatively expected, but there were some good challenges along the way. Sam, you caught most of the game. What do you think?
Do you know, I was actually, maybe I shouldn't have been. I was massively impressed by Canada. I thought they clearly didn't take their they didn't read the script, did they? They come out fighting, scored first, put us under the cosh a little bit. But you've got to say, actually, fair play to England for. They were under a hell of a lot of pressure, Canada at home, essentially. There's a lot of people in that stadium. There's a lot of expectation on them. They came through with a couple of good performances from a couple of Sarries girls as well. A few yellow cards to throw into the mix. There was a lot to digest. But yeah, I think the main thing for me was just the performance of Canada was very, very good. I think above expectation. And then the manner in which England handled them was also massively positive. A few weeks ago we were moaning about them beating New Zealand not all that well pre-tournament, and France as well. So to take on a very good Canada team in the end and come out victorious is good and sets us up nicely for next year, which, as I've said a couple of times now, for women's rugby in the Northern Hemisphere, I'd go as far as to say the Northern Hemisphere, England winning that tournament could be one of the most important things in the history of the game. So a strong England team at home winning a World Cup could do similarly to women's rugby as it did to the women's football with the Lionesses winning recently. So all eyes on what will still be Twickenham Stadium next year for the Women's World Cup, not the Allianz Arena or whatever crap they call it now.
We're not held to the laws, really, are we? So we can call it whatever the hell we like. But yeah, I mean, Duncan, that's a pretty tough fixture for England, that last one in the WXV tournament. But I'd imagine that we're all looking at that and thinking that's exactly what England need. A bit of a tough test before we get into that Six Nations and then World Cup cycle, right?
It's good for a team to give the number one team in the world, England, a good run, isn't it? We've seen a lot of Canadians in the PWR.
Yep.
I was watching. I don't think Sophie de Goody was playing, was she?
No, she's still. She got a pretty serious injury at the back end of last season. Yeah, she's still working her way back from that. But she'd be one of 6 Saracens players in that Canada team if she.
Yeah, we've got a few, and I think Marley Packer said it afterwards that the PWR is making the world game better because there's a lot of players coming here, getting professional contracts, getting better, and Canada are one of the examples of that happening.
No, definitely, and yeah, like I said, we'll benefit from at least 5 of them present in the Saracens team, and I caught a bit of the game, and I was quite impressed by one of our new signings. The brief amount that we saw of fancy Bermudas, which I've got a few pairs of those.
Brilliant.
Sorry, Fancy, if you ever listen to this podcast, but yeah, we're looking forward to seeing a very, very quick winger, same sort of style as Paige Farries, who'll be back over here as well. So yeah, lots to look forward to. And yeah, further down, WXV Australia winning the second tier against beating Scotland, a few Saracens players in it. Wales finally got a win again, a few Saracens players in that, and there's actually a bit of I don't know whether anyone sort of saw any highlights, but the third tier with the real sort of developing nations, it was the tournament was won with the last kick of the game, with Fiji missing a conversion, I think, right at the end, which would have meant Samoa winning the tournament, but instead it was Spain. So both Spain and Samoa, I think, qualify for the World Cup next year. So yeah, lots down there, but yeah, a lot of Saracens players coming back, and we're looking forward to seeing all of those, definitely.
I wonder how quickly they're going to play.
I'd imagine that a few of them are going to come back in pretty quick for a lot of teams, aren't they? But yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens. Certainly not this weekend, you'd imagine, but there might be a few players who didn't get a lot of game time that have jumped on a plane pretty quick. But
I was going to say they've probably still got jet lag, haven't they, coming back over? But yeah, I mean, with a shortened season, you'd like to think, get them back in, get them playing. A lot of these players actually don't benefit when we will talk about player welfare, but sometimes getting them game time is the best thing for them, keeps them fresh, keeps them going. So hopefully we'll see it. But to be honest, those that have been here and haven't been over in Canada have done a bit of a sterling job for us so far this season. So a lot of the England internationals, Canadian internationals are probably going to walk back in, you'd like to think, but it is nice that we've got a competitive squad.
Absolutely. Well, leads us quite nicely onto, well done, Sam, onto the Saracens Women against Sale Sharks women's game. Now, the scoreline on the face of it is pretty heavily weighted towards Saracens, but Sale were pretty physical, and they gave us a really, really good game for long periods. I mean, Duncan, you caught some of it, and I caught most of it. So between us, we've just about got this covered, haven't we? But what were your impressions with the final bits that you saw?
Yeah, they look really good. I mean, I was watching the TV thinking that I couldn't see it, and then I was scrolling through Twitter and saw this ad from the international SIM card company saying that the game was on their app.
Yep.
So I downloaded the app, and the coverage on my iPad was really good. I've got to say, it was a good picture, a number of cameras, and it was. They were as impressive as they were in the final bit against Ealing. I think with most of the women's games that I see, if you tune in for the last 20 minutes, you see the Saracens team at their best, and I don't know whether that was the case.
I think it pretty much was, yeah. Actually, you mentioned that app. I mean, I found it a very bizarre-looking app when I first signed into it. I was very confused. But I think, personally, I'd like to compliment particularly Harry Scott Munro in the Saracens media team, but everyone who's involved in that for the professional job they do of streaming the games at home at the StoneX. No slight on Sale whatsoever, but I think you really do see how much effort Saracens put into what they do, and hopefully teams can catch up and follow suit. But yeah, it was the game itself. I mean, Sale very, very physical coming into it, but there were a lot of young Saracens players. Sam, you mentioned, there's a lot of players that are going to walk back into our team, and you are probably right. But there's an awful lot of people waiting in the wings that really do deserve a shot playing for Saracens. And someone we mentioned, or a few of them mentioned last week, actually was Joya Bennett, who's one of the younger players in the team in the second row. Looks pretty slight for a second row, a bit more of your gangly giraffe than your marauding rhinoceros that you get in the second row sometimes, but really, really physical and really fronted up. There's actually someone that was name checked by Alex Osterbury post match, so yeah, definitely something for her. And a fullback, Gemma Jo Lincoln, scoring a couple of tries, and yeah, looking very strong as well. So we've definitely got some good young players coming through, haven't we, Duncan, over the last couple of games that we've seen?
Definitely, and Joya is particularly. She lives up to her name in terms of how she is to watch. She's a great player to watch.
Absolutely. But yeah, it was a pretty comfortable victory in the end. 50 odd points to not a lot is always, it doesn't matter how well your opposition's playing you if you win by 50. Excellent work. So yeah, 2 wins out of 2 for the women, and we'll look ahead to their next match coming up later. But we'll stop there quickly, and then we'll have to talk about the elephant in the room, probably, won't we?
You're listening to the Fezcast.
You are listening to the Fezcast, which is proudly sponsored by the Saracens Supporters Association, and I'm Alison Davis, one of the SSA committee. For a £10 annual subscription, the SSA provides our members with monthly newsletters, virtual and in-person player events, away match ticket allocations, and we organise pre-match gatherings at away matches. We sponsor men's and women's players, and we support the Saracens Foundation Track Club on behalf of our members. On top of all that, every year we have a seasonal SSA badge, which is exclusive to members. Where else can you get that much value for a tenner? Join now at membermojo.co.uk/SSA, or come and see us on match day in the Oasis at the Stonex.
This is the Fezcast.
Right, part 2 of the Fezcast, where we have to talk about the London Derby. Before we discuss anything about the match itself, we're going to have to talk injuries, I think. Because they're almost separate and irrelevant. Firstly, Juan Martin Gonzalez, we believe a bicep injury of undeterminate seriousness, and we wish him all the best. Hopefully that's not too bad. But unfortunately for everyone who was at the match and watching on the telly, we all witnessed a pretty horrific injury to Andy Onyema Christie. Possibly a fracture and dislocation of his ankle, which, that sort of thing is a good 3 months or so before you even think about putting too much weight on it and doing any impact. So season possibly over for Andy. But yeah, I don't really know where to start with that, to be honest. He's incredibly unlucky as a player. A couple of arm breaks already to go along with this, and someone who's had a fantastic start to the season. It's just a bitter loss for us, right?
Yeah, he was making the breaks even in that short period he played that we could have done with later on. I mean, I don't know what you saw on the telly, but I was just past the Quins 5-meter line, and it was right in front of me. And I didn't catch it straight away until everybody around me was going, look at his foot, look at his foot. And you look at it, and it's like if you'd taken an Action Man figure and just twisted the foot round the wrong way, wasn't it? It was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, TV directors didn't show any replays, but I didn't do this, but I did see it live and just about saw it straight away, and I would advise that no one hits the rewind button. It's all I can say. It's not nice. But
yeah, kudos to TNT for not showing it again. Number one, if there's kids watching, they probably shouldn't be seeing something like that. But secondly, just in terms of for the player himself and the family watching on, I think they did a good job of that. And you know what, for the nasty bastards that have filmed it and put it onto social media. Well, you know where you're heading. Absolutely disgusting behaviour. But yeah, we wish Andy all the best. And I know he's a very mature bloke, and having spoken to him a few times on social media, I know he's a very passionate bloke, loves Saracens to bits. I'd imagine I have actually seen a video of the fact that he's laying there on the oxygen watching the game on his phone. I think he would have cared more about the result than the outcome of his injury. He's Saracens through and through, and he'll do everything he possibly can to get back supporting the lads as quickly as he possibly can. And as soon as he can run, he'll play water boy. He's that committed to the cause. So obviously we all wish him the best and a speedy recovery, and just hope he's not in too much pain. And mentally, it's not been too much of a knock for him, because you saw him come out this season as fit and as bulked and as strong as he's ever been. He looked like a man on an absolute mission this year. And I said before the game to my other half, I think he's an outside bet for the Lions with the start he's had for this season, and that's now been put to bed, obviously. But yeah, he's a great bloke, great man, a great Saracen, and he'll be back, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we reached out to him briefly over the weekend and had a a very, very short conversation, as I think many people did with Andy over the weekend. He is quite approachable like that. And he's obviously publicly come out and said thank you to everyone, and yeah, we're here if he needs us. He can come and have a chat. That'd be nice. But it's really, really horrible to see, to be honest. Like you said, he started the season so well, so I think it's actually going to be quite a big miss for the rest of the season, as it was on the day. Very, very hard to judge exactly what an impact losing 2 back rowers did to the result. I can only assume it did have a bit of an impact, but let's get on to the game. It was, a lot of people have said it was a game for the purists, and Jez in particular was pretty damning of some style of play and some tactics. But I actually thought it was a pretty enthralling, edge of a seat game. To me, it showed you didn't have to score a dozen tries for it to be exciting. Is the wrong word, but at least I certainly wasn't bored watching it. It kept me interested for the whole game and nervous. But what was it like in the stands, Duncan? Did you sort of get that?
No, it was like you say. It was an entertaining game. Everybody was engrossed. Nobody was wandering off for a drink or anything. And it's a strange old thing, isn't it, to see a victory that was basically called a Harlequins victory that was founded upon defence.
Yeah.
And their defence was superb. I mean, Barry picked out some stats earlier in the day, didn't he? We had 58% of the possession and 70% of the territory.
Yeah.
So you could ask, did the Andy Christie injury have an effect on the team? Well, based on that, we were really trying. We were really going for it. And I think their defence was so good that it caused us to make those mistakes.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I mean, the slight counter to it is the stat that you picked out about turnovers, which there were a lot of turnovers against us. Now, if we'd have had our full starting back row, would there have been less? Don't know. But yeah, I don't think we can take away from that Harlequins defensive performance, which was very Saracens-like, Saracens of old. And yeah, that we didn't really have much of an answer. But
still, they out Saracens us, didn't they? Really, you could say. And do you know what? Kudos to them. Do you know what's been quite nice actually? You of course you get the trolls on Twitter and whatnot that say nasty things, but actually I think a lot of the post game stuff, maybe the Christie incident had something to do with it, but it seems to be quite good. A lot of the Saracens fans have been, quite rightly commending Quins on a very, very good performance. They thoroughly deserve the win, and a lot of Quins being relatively humble in victory as well, which is nice to see. I think on the question of does the best back rower in the world in Juan Martin Gonzalez and probably the best back rower so far in the Premiership in Andy Christie make a difference to the victory? I think you're probably thinking there's at least a tries difference in those two players being on the pitch, maybe one in either direction. We won't go into whether Ben El should have been pinged for that amazing textbook turnover, but in my mind, if those two players stay on the pitch, we win the game, which is sad. But I said this afterwards, and I can't remember if it was actually in the Fezcast group or another one. Surprisingly, I think Saracens will learn more from that game than Quins will, because Quins won't play like that again all season, because there isn't another team they need to play like that against. Whereas Saracens will have learned a crap load from that, particularly some of the younger players being out of position and stuff like that. So as tough as it is to take, and you don't want to be losing the Quins, will we see this as maybe a bit of a turning point for us by the end of the season?
You're totally right about the quality that was lost in those two players, but we had Tom Willis and Hugh Tizard come on. But they would have been a couple of amazing weapons to come on at the 60th minute.
That's what I mean. Tom Willis coming on 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ,
It was very nice for Hugh Tizard to come on though, and to have the raucous support of his previous club. There's so many people in the stands shouting Hugh every time he got near the ball.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a couple of people say, "Oh, I'm not going again because the Quins fans booed Hugh Tizard." Come on, it wasn't exactly vitriolic. It was.
You're allowed
it
to have a
was good
pantomime.
spirit.
We don't have to do that as Saracens because all our players go to France.
Yeah.
Nor would we boo them anyway, would we?
No, no one's ever really left under that much of a cloud. Were you booing Titi Lamacitelli when he got the ball?
Yeah, the arse. I can't believe it. How dare he move on to another club?
It gave me the opportunity to say very loudly when Hugh Tizard scored, "Oh, I bet you all enjoyed that."
Yeah, we've got a lot to shout about that game, but that is one. I mean, Hugh, to be fair to Hugh, he did sort of. I mean, he was always going to be asked something in the press, but he did kind of stick his neck on the line and say it's the game he really wants to win. You think, oh, you've set yourself up.
But he lived up to it, didn't he?
Having said that, I think there was a couple of reasonable performances that looked pretty decent. Yeah. I think if we'd won the game, Tom Willis was an absolute shoo-in for man of the match, player of the match. Again, just like the guy's a beast. If he doesn't play for England in the autumn internationals, then Steve Borthwick needs his head checking. I actually thought as well that given his seniority in stature and in fitness, I think Goody had a decent game at fullback.
He did. He looks like the old Alex Goody, weaving.
That was the haircut. It was the haircut, I think. The trim, hadn't he? His lid was a bit better than normal.
It's an interesting one with Elliot Daly on the wing. I mean, I think he's definitely a better fullback than he is winger, and he's not a bad winger. But Roti was running around before the game. I don't know why he wasn't playing. Maybe it's a little bit of a precaution. Or you got one of the other speedy wingers who might have given more of an edge than Elliot Daly.
I think, to be honest with you, they would have. We've got to put as much as we lost the game, the preparation for the game. We know what our management team are like. They leave no stone unturned, and they would have played the team that they thought tactically were going to outmaneuver Quins. I don't think anyone thought that Quins team was going to turn up. So, having the likes of Gooden and Daly in addition to the halfbacks, the extra brains on the pitch when you're playing against a team that runs around and throws the ball left, right, and centre, you want more rugby brains on the pitch. So that's probably the reasoning behind it. Ultimately got us a bit unstuck. But actually, to be fair, how much did our backs really play a role in the game? I think a lot of the time, by the time the ball got to the backs, we'd either run out of space out wide either way, or to be honest, we'd gone through so many phases, which we're not used to, that we'd run out of ideas. Usually we punch a hole through or we kick through within probably 6 to 7 phases, as Jez likes to put. We play a little bit of rugby league at times. Nothing wrong with that. But I think, you've got to go back to Quins. The defence was so, monstrous. And they made us work for every ruck ball, which is something Saracens have done a lot in the past. It just shows the pressure that it puts on the team. They have to go through the phases, and eventually, we've all been there when we've played. You run out of ideas. You run out of calls, and somebody, you give the ball to somebody and they don't know what to do with it, and Jamie George gets pushed in the touch, and that's kind of what happened, wasn't it? Really.
I think the other person you have to give kudos to in a low-scoring game, because their first try was all the forwards bashing it over, the likes of Lamacitelli, as you say. But Marcus Smith unpicked the defence to make the defining score, didn't he? The score that really made the difference, and it was a lovely bit of play.
It was, yeah, and you can't argue with it. As much as it pains us sometimes, he had a couple of really fantastic moments in that game that, obviously made the difference. And Fergus Burke is growing into his Saracens career. I mean, I managed to just hold my fingers off the keyboard. A couple of people on social media basically writing off Fergus Burke as a Saracens player 3 matches into his career, which is just insane. But we've seen glimpses from him that he can do Marcus Smith style things as well. But Smith out there was pretty. I mean, well, it was the difference. Sam, you mentioned the Ben Earl turnover that wasn't. I mean, I was livid at that one, to be honest. But
I had to be careful because I was at my missus' parents' house, so I couldn't say any naughty words.
But ultimately, that was cancelled out a little while later by a Saracens penalty and didn't actually make any difference whatsoever to the end result. So, it won.
I don't know why Daly didn't take that long range kick though. I think that would have been. I saw some of the stuff on social. He was kicking him straight as a dart before. That would have been a shoo-in. And then the little things like that. Do they change a game a little bit? You never know, do you? But that was a bit of a strange one. Lazowski's been good enough, but if I'm honest with you, I think the kicking experiment with Lazowski is probably over in my mind. I think we should probably be thinking more long term and give the kicking back to Burke next game. Because if he was hitting him, if he was getting 90, 95%, 100%, great, but he's not. And I love Lazowski. He's been brilliant so far this season, but I think it's probably time. You talk about Burke. I don't think he had a terrible game. I don't think he's had a terrible game all season. People forget he's a young lad, right? He's never lived outside of New Zealand, which, only 19 people live in New Zealand. And he's come over to St Albans, which, okay, is a city, but it's really just a town. But then he's talking about getting the tube into London and being surrounded by millions of people. It's a massive culture shock for him. He's coming to a new country, a new team. He's had to follow one of the best fly-offs in the world. Give the boy a break. I think he's actually been absolutely fine, and he's shown some good little touches. And I think he's actually a nice balance between a Farrell-esque player and a Smith-esque player. He sits in between the two, and he can do a little bit of both, which is ultimately going to play dividends for us, I think.
No, I definitely agree with you. Yeah, we got to give him some time. And yeah, like I said, I don't think he was the problem at the weekend. And then, to be honest, I don't know that we had a lot of problems. I think sometimes you just got to look at the opposition you've played and go, fair enough, they've absolutely done us. And into that. 3-word reviews. Admittedly, there are a lot less of these this week because I forgot to put it out on every single channel that we have. And the vast majority of the ones that we've got in are along the lines of get well, Andy. So there's not many of these thoughts with Andy Onyema Christie. Get well soon, get well, Andy, etc., etc. Kazi says won and lost. We played 2 games. That's what happened. That is the review of the weekend. Thank you very much for coming on. Sean Duffy, who is a London Irish fan, so I do feel for him at the moment, but he's been watching Saracens. So welcome to Sean. Thank you very much. Says blunt in attack, which is exactly right. I think that was a lot of our problem. We had plan A. And as Jez loves, you got to have a plan B. I'm not entirely sure we did. We started chucking it around a little bit in the second half, and that wasn't necessarily working either. But it is just one game. It does happen, but it is perhaps an issue we had a little bit last season as well. So I don't know, Duncan, do you sort of have any kind of theory of what we might end up doing in the next couple of weeks?
God, I don't know anything about it at all, but there's there was a couple of near misses, especially early on, that could have changed the whole flavour of the game. If we'd gone ahead, it might have put pressure on Quins. We were near the line. We dropped the ball. If we hadn't dropped the ball, managed to get it over, it could have had a totally different aspect to it. The game. It was close. It was close. I mean, I suppose you could say we didn't play particularly well, and it was close. Yeah, we could have got that extra score on a couple of occasions.
And if you look at all the stuff like we've said on social media, and again, I'm not trying to take anything away from Quins. They did play really, really well, but a lot of it is treating it like it's some kind of momentous occasion. Quins beat Saracens by 7 points at home against apparently a bad Saracens team and a well-beaten Quins team. Put it into perspective, we've got a losing bonus point at the Stoop, which is a lot more than a lot of teams are going to get down there this year. I always are really concerned going down to the Stoop. It's a tough place to go. Last 2 years, we've come away with some astonishing wins, which has been lovely to see. But ultimately, it's a really hard place to go. And I think there's possibly an element of some of the management might be quietly okay with how things went, considering the injuries, considering how well Quins played in defence. We've got a lot to take from that game, and as I said, I think we'll take more from that game than Quins will.
I think you're probably right, and
apart from points.
Nicely onto the final 3-word review, which is one I wholeheartedly agree with, from Chris Braganza. It's only October. Say no more.
Yeah.
Although the season's 25% over, isn't it?
That is a point.
Just because you got a hangover doesn't mean you need to be pessimistic.
No, it is early. It's a long way to go.
Nobody in the league is unbeaten after 4 rounds. It's going to be tight as it was last season. But one of the team that has leapfrogged us at the top of the table is Bristol Bears. Guess we're going at the weekend. So there's not a lot of respite. But as we've been trying to do all season, with some success better than others, we are trying to do a bit of cross-pollination of podcasts. And one of the best at that, it has to be said, is the Bears Beyond the Gate podcast. So Barry has been doing his usual roving reporter stuff. He's been on the Bears show for this week, and the favour has been returned, and they're appearing on ours. So we'll play in Barry having a chat with Pete from the Bears pod to preview a double-header weekend against both Bristol Bears teams, and we'll come back after that.
Hi, this is Petrus Duplessis, and you are listening to the Fezcast.
This is the Fezcast.
Well, I'm joined now by Pete Brearley from Bears Beyond the Gate. Pete, thanks very much for taking the time to come and speak to us, and welcome to the Fezcast.
Well, thanks very much, Barry. It's always a pleasure, and we have had sort of interactions between the two pods over the last couple of seasons, so it's always good fun talking to fellow fan podcasters.
Yeah, absolutely. Massive weekend of 2 games coming up, really. So let's start with the women's game, which kicks off at 12 o'clock. Before we get there, actually, Sarries fans, do check the travel situation on Saturday, because there's a planned closure of the M4 between 18 and 19, and I think that could give us some challenges, but I'm sure we're all well up for that. So let's get on with the women's game. So far, Bristol Bears women have only played once, because obviously there's 9 teams in the league, so everyone has a rest week. Rested this week, but one game against Loughborough Lightning, which you won quite comfortably, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think it was 2 hat-tricks from both our wingers, Millie David, who's a young winger, and Renika Bonner as well. A great start to the season. Obviously, we've been building the Bears women team over the last couple of seasons with Dave Ward as our head coach, and got to the final last year, lost to Gloucester Hartbury, which wasn't too much of a disgrace, to be fair, but pushed them quite a long way. So I think quite lots expected of the Bears women this season, and of course, it will be a big contest this Saturday as part of the doubleheader.
Well, yeah, I mean, Bristol and Saracens are one of 2 of the 4 still unbeaten sides in the league this season, and of course, in the Power Up series, you had a massive win in round 3, beating Gloucester and getting a modicum of revenge for the final last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, realistically, there are kind of 4 big teams in this women's league, and we're one of them. I think again we are work in progress. I mean, it's going to be quite hard to judge how it's going to go, because obviously a lot of the teams are missing their internationals, and we have over last season before bolstered our squad with some serious internationals who won't be there. But it's the same for everyone. But I do feel that we've got a really, really good sort of team spirit in the place, and there's a lot of alignment with what the men are doing, and the fan base is growing. They're really promoting the women's game, and I like to think that playing at Ashton Gate this Saturday will be a little extra boost for the girls, maybe give us a slight advantage, who knows.
Yeah, it should be good, and I'm hoping to get there for it myself, assuming I can get down the M4 or round it at least one way or another. Then on to the men, which kicks off at 3:05. First versus second. Perhaps, certainly I don't think we saw that coming at the beginning of the season. So early days, but you've had a heck of a start, including a win against Bath and a fantastic game against Exeter again last weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite unexpected for us as well. And considering quite a lot of the kind of rugby pundits were putting Bristol down as a bottom of the table finish, despite the fact we finished very strongly last season, and it's obviously early days. I mean, it's fantastic. It's kind of a continuation of what happened post Six Nations last year, where we really came back and Pat Lam has admitted it, really, that he kind of went back to the drawing board and, re-looked at the game plan and essentially decided that we just had to stop worrying about percentages and stop worrying about kicking and just go and try and regain what has been known as the Bears way, which was, was seen in his in the COVID season when we got to the semi-final and sadly lost against Harlequins. And I think since then we haven't really seen that as a general thing. So having said all that, it's been a bit of a roller coaster this season, and on another day we may not be sitting where we are. I mean, I guess all 4 games have been slightly different. We did a workmanlike bonus point victory over Newcastle, which wasn't particularly good, but we got the 5 points. Gloucester was just a crazy first home game, which we lost, obviously, but scored 40-odd points. However, on another day, when you looked at the tries we gifted them, it could have been an easy win for us. Bath was realistically unexpected in some ways, not necessarily the fact it was close, but I think the way we actually went out in the first half and just basically, destroyed them in the first half and then managed to hang on for the rest of it. And then Exeter, to be honest, was a bit like the opposite. I think at 32-12 down on Saturday after 66 minutes or so, I think most Bears fans had probably thought, oh, well, we're going to have these games and perhaps today just wasn't our day. And then, of course, we had that crazy last 10 minutes when we scored 4 tries and Ibitoye scored a hat-trick. And lo and behold, we happened to be top of the table thanks to Harlequins doing a bit of a job on you yesterday. So it's been a. We always talk about the Bears roller coaster, but it does kind of feel a bit like that already this season.
Yeah, thanks for reminding us of Harlequins yesterday. That was not much fun for those of us who were there. But yeah, I mean, watching the highlights of your game at Exeter, it certainly did seem a topsy-turvy game. It was almost as if every time you touched the ball in the last 15 minutes, you scored. But Ibitoye is a heck of a player. I can't quite work out how it's taken him so long to really click somewhere. I mean, obviously he was at Harlequins to begin his career and played for England under 20 as well, alongside some very good players, and it never quite worked for him down there. But he is certainly quick. I mean, one of his tries, he was being chased down by Josh Hodge, who's no slow coach either, and Hodge was not catching him, not in a month of Sundays. So we're going to have to be very careful and keep an eye on him at the weekend. But you've lost some big names from last season, haven't you? I mean, just the list I've got: Dan Thomas, Ed Holmes, Callum Sheedy, your record point scorer, I believe, Piers O'Connor, Carl Sinclair, and Virami Vakatawa. I knew I shouldn't have said that. Virami Vakatawa, who you did, I believe, try to keep hold of, but he seems to have disappeared. But who have you brought in to replace those?
Well, I mean, the reality is we probably haven't brought in as much to replace, and it has been reported, but even by Pat Lam himself, that we purposely are spending under the salary cap, which is slightly ironic because we were one of the clubs pushing for it to be put up again. And we've kind of sold this idea pre-season that we were going to have a smaller, more slimmed down squad. Having said that, we did make a couple of signings. We signed big Bill Matter from Edinburgh, who unfortunately he has got injured and we haven't seen him yet at all. And we, in some ways, we've had a couple of signings from last year that have now, that have perhaps, there's one was Santi Grondona, which was the Argentinian flanker who we signed before the World Cup. Then he got an ACL in a warm-up game and we didn't see him all last season. And then he actually played his first game for us against Bath and had an absolute stormer. So in a way, that's kind of that was like a new signing. But yeah, I mean, not an awful lot. I think the theory now is that we need to see some of our younger players come through, or Pat Lam has always been quite keen on trying to pick up maybe sort of unheralded sort of players that can turn them into diamonds. And Ibitoye is a good example. I mean, somebody who had undoubted talent. We saw his development last season. There was no doubt about the fact. But I think this season he's really coming to fruition, and I think it's the belief, I think, that has been given in him to play the way he wants to play, and also he's tightened up on things like defence, his kicking and his catching under the high ball has been really good as well. So yeah, I mean, a few, but no real eye-catching signings. And as you say, we lost quite a few of those players. Although realistically, I think some of them were ready to go anyway. The likes of Sinclair, Dan Thomas, Callum Sheedy had been good servants for the club, but I think it wasn't a surprise that they left.
Yeah, well, it's always good to hear. And as you say, you've always picked up players from under the radar, as it were. I mean, Rich Lane from Bedford is the one that springs to my mind as being a good player. And you've got Bernard Yancey van Rensburg, who always terrorises me whenever I see him play against us. He was the same at London Irish, a heck of a player, and I think it's going to be a cracking game on Saturday afternoon. Shame no Max Malins though; he's out for about 8 weeks, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. He picked up a knee injury against Bath. He has started the season very well. It is probably a bit of a shame that he's not playing against his old mates. And but Rich Lane, as you mentioned, I mean, he's a worthy fullback replacement. But the problem we have is that when you start going beyond that, we are a little bit thin on the ground. And the same with our wingers. We've got two wingers, Noah Heward, who would potentially be a first choice winger. He's out injured. Siva Nualango, potentially first guard. He's out injured. So we're now starting to delve into some of our youngsters, the likes of Jack Bates, Diego Bailey, Joe Jenkins, who has come in for another great signing that we got from the Championship, which was James Williams, who's also injured. So I don't know. I mean, I know you've had a bit of a restructure. You've got some young lads in there as well. So far, it seems to be working well for us. I genuinely think that the way that you are approaching your rugby at the moment as a club, and the way that Mark McCall has kind of rebooted your team, I think we're going to see an absolute cracker on Saturday. I think both teams are going to go for it. I think we both want to make a statement. I think both teams are going to look to try and dominate up front, obviously, but going to try and unleash their backs. And, who knows, it could be yet another absolute, well, maybe a stressful day for both sets of fans with one team just nicking it at the end, I think.
Well, yeah, let's hope it's a great game. And the Quins game last weekend was perhaps one more for the purists. But let's hope we see a bit more open and running rugby this weekend. Well, Pete, thanks very much for your time and for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
No problem. Look forward to meeting you too.
Cheers, Pete. Bye-bye.
You're listening to the Fezcast.
Thanks to Barry and to Pete for that preview. A double header weekend, which would be nice to see. I cannot travel. I'd never travel. It's terrible. But are either of you two going down to Bristol, or are you sofaing it?
I'm not. I'd like to. Bristol have been rubbish for years, haven't they? Trying to play a very expansive game, and it seems to have suddenly come together for them, and they're looking very good indeed. So brilliant timing for us to go away there, and it's going to be a big challenge.
I love going down to Bristol. I think they've got a great setup there. It's one of the few larger stadiums that seems to really work for rugby, I think. Fans are great, really, really passionate. I was planning on going and unfortunately can't because I've got a work commitment now. But it's going to be blooming tough down there, isn't it? They're a cracking team. We've got two players down that would have been a shoe in a start. We're coming off, a very, very tough encounter. Do you know what? It's anyone's to call. I think Bristol will be just as concerned. They'll be talking about Saracens licking their wounds and the pushback off what happened at the weekend. So who knows? I think it's too close to call, to be honest. Two teams that on their day can chuck a ball about like the Barbarians, but can also be very, very tight and well drilled in defence. So it's going to be a cracking game.
Well, we're looking forward to that being 3-3 at the end of the week.
That'll be the defence I was talking about.
But yeah, I mean, you could probably say exactly the same thing about the women's game as well. Both teams looking to play pretty expansive, probably up the top of the table. So yeah, it's going to be hopefully be a really exciting double-header weekend for everyone going down there, and we'll probably have to get Barry onto the show proper rather than just doing his little side piece that he's had for the last few weeks, because he's definitely going to be there. But
yeah, he's got to earn his wages, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it brilliant that a club can get it together to have a double header? I think it's a really good idea. Normally the fixtures go against it because there's no coordination at all between the two leagues, which is crazy in my opinion.
Do you reckon that was just a complete fluke then?
Yeah. A little bit would have been a little bit of engineering around to make it happen, but generally, it seems to be impossible, which is,
I mean, it's something that we've talked about a little bit from Saracens' side. I think they're reluctant to do something like that more because seeing the women's game as a standalone event. I mean, we had 2 games in the weekend last week, and we've got 2 games in the weekend after next. There's more than one way of doing things.
There's a huge percentage of people who come for the first time to StoneX come as a result of going to the showdown at Tottenham. So as a marketing event, it's not just financially important to Saracens, it's a real spearhead of marketing. And for the women's season, they've put all of their marketing effort into the duel to get a big crowd there, to make it a big event, and a big event on an annual basis.
Well, look, anyway, Saracens men looking to bounce back against Bristol, and Saracens women looking to continue on a good start to the season. Yeah, we'll see what both sides look like, because there may well be changes in both, and hopefully, it'd be nice to have a double header weekend where the away team win both games, wouldn't it? That'd be quite irritating. Although maybe not great for the game in the sort of big picture, but who cares about that? Anyway. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today. That is the end of this week's Fezcast. We'll be back next week with Christ knows who. We'll figure it out later on, shall we?
We usually do.
Exactly. Duncan, Sam, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening.
Cheers, mate.
This is the Fezcast.